Doing okay? I heard Jeff did okay. Well, that's expected. Well, last week we was in Daniel chapter 11. We went through about verse 35, and it talked about the silent years. There's been a lot of debate what happens between the Old and New Testament. Well, Daniel told us a lot what happens right there in those 35 verses. But I also said that Antiochus IV Epiphanes, had his daughter marry one of these kings, and her name was Cleopatra. But I want to clarify this. Her name was Cleopatra, but it is not the Cleopatra that we think about. She was Cleopatra the first. The Cleopatra we think about in Mark Antony is Cleopatra the seventh. But her name was still Cleopatra, same lineage, but it wasn't Cleopatra the seventh. I just wanted to clarify that. And, verses 21 through 35 is history. We can look back through history and see these things. But what we're getting ready to delve into is future. We can kind of outline it. We're going to have a world ruler, a world religion, a world war, a time of tribulation, a deliverance at the end of tribulation, resurrection and judgment, and rewards of righteousness in these next set of scriptures. But we're going to go back to Daniel chapter 8, verses 20 through 25, and read that as a little refresher. And it says, "The ram which thou sawest, having two horns, are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, which is Alexander the Great. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king." Now that, and we'll continue through verse 22. "Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power." These are history. We can read about it through secular history. Verse 23, "And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power." Whose power is it? Satan's. Okay, we're talking about the future king, Antichrist. "He shall destroy wonderfully, shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. He shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace," that's important, "shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand." All right, back to Daniel chapter 11. And if you could call verse 36 anything, I would say it would be the willful king. And it says, "And the king shall do according to his will." Now we're speaking of the Antichrist. "He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. And he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done." So we see here that this guy is going to be speaking all kinds of things, magnifying himself, speaking marvelous things against the God. Not good. Verses 37 through 39. Says, "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain." There's a lot happens right here. So we'll go back to verse 37. says, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. Could that make him Jewish? Possibly. I mean, I've read everything you can read on it, and there's so many conjectures. I don't know. Possibly. Maybe a Jewish background. But what I come across, and me and John Bucks talked about this in times past, it says, nor the desire of women. Could that make him a homosexual? We won't rule that out. But there is a Hebrew phrase. It's called nor the desire of women. The desire of women is a messianic title as a Hebrew phrase. The dream of every Jewish mother was to give birth to the Christ. Okay? And that's still probably in effect today because the Jewish people are still looking for the Messiah. Okay? They didn't receive him. Remember, he wept over Jerusalem because they didn't know the time of his coming. But I thought that was very interesting. Nor the desire of women. I don't know. But that phrase I came across just kind of piqued my interest a little bit. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians Chapter 2. And it's odd that we go here because this morning I picked up a Bible Sally had been reading in, and she was there too. Chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. And this is Paul writing to the church of Thessalonica. And part of the reason he wrote this letter is because they was so convinced of the imminency of Christ, they weren't going to work. They were just waiting on him to show up. They were, and we're supposed to be looking for the imminency of Christ. We're supposed to expect him at any time. But that's the reason he wrote this. But what comes out is pretty neat. It says, let no man deceive you by any means. Let me just start it to verse 1, sorry. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and then a man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things. And we'll just go on. And now ye know that what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in this time, for the mystery of iniquity doeth already work. Only who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. I thought that was pretty interesting that Paul is giving this insight. All these years later, Paul is looking for the right things. So let's continue on. We'll go to verse 39. It says, thus shall he do in the most strongholds with the strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. God does not like you dividing his land. Joel chapter 3, I think it is. Yeah. Joel chapter 3, verse 1 says, for behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring against the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. He's not, God doesn't look too soundly upon that. And you know, I've said this before, and it's bothered me for years. We, as a nation, view ourselves as supporters of Israel. And to an extent, maybe so. But none of us that I have ever seen from America has stood up in the United Nations and said, hey, these are the boundaries God gave Israel. Get out. It's Israel. You know, so have we been blessed for our support of Israel? I think so, but our support has been minute compared to what God thinks is support. You know, so we can't be patting ourselves on the back too much. You can also read about this in Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 3. But we're going to continue on here. Daniel, verses 40 through 45 here, I guess you would call it an Armageddon scenario. We're pushing towards the end times here. It says, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. So the kings of the south and the north don't like this guy. So they're going to come at him from land and sea. And you can read about that in Isaiah 21 and Daniel 9. It says, he shall also enter into the glorious land, and the glorious land is Israel. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. So all these countries are going to be overthrown by the Antichrist, but these people are going to escape. Edom, Moab, Ammon, that is currently the country of Jordan. Okay? And Jordan has had a peace treaty with Israel for years. Because they have a lot of common problems, the main one being fresh water. So they work together to make these things happen. I'm going to try to tie in some stuff here that I think is very interesting. We're going to go to Matthew 24, I believe I'm at. It's good to look back and see everybody today. I looked back there for Dublin and Lillian last week. I looked over for Fred and Linda, and I was like, where's everybody? Everybody was in the penalty box. But it's good to see y'all this morning. All right, Matthew 24. We'll start about verse 14. It says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. That's important. Let him which is on the housetop not take down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world, to this time, nor ever shall be. Except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. And we could read on through there, but we may come back to this. Okay. Where are they fleeing to? The mountains. What mountains are around there? Well, to the east is the only real mountains that we know of. And those mountains are in Jordan. And in those mountains of Jordan is the city of Petra. Okay, have y'all ever watched any documentaries on Petra or anything? If you've seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That city that's in there, that is Petra. I watched a documentary on it a while back. Very interesting. This group of people went in here and carved this city into these cliffs. They had cisterns for water. They had sources of running water that they piped through the city in these cisterns. And they had cisterns for waste to get rid of the waste. I mean, it was pretty dang interesting how they did all this. And the reason I say this, and that's what most of these Bible scholars, I'll call them, believe, and I tend to sway this way, is in Revelation chapter 12. We'll just start at verse 1, I guess. I will give you a minute to get there. It said, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head the crown of 12 stars." I believe this to be Israel. "And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought it forth, a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God to his throne." We all know who this is talking about. "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, and they should feed her there 1,260 days," 1,260 days or 3.5 years. And they believe that this is Petra that they will flee to in the country of Jordan. I don't know. It's all plausible, you know. I don't know. But God has made preparations for this, or he wouldn't have put it in here. So they're going to go somewhere, and that's the only logical place I can see at this current time. So we'll go on. I can find my place again here. Back to Daniel. Let's go to... Let's recap on 41. So the children of Edom, Moab, and the chief children of Ammon are going to be spared from this. Why? Probably because the children of Israel have a place to flee to, I believe. Verse 42. "He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to take away many." So there's going to be some tidings out of the north and the east. There's a lot of conjecture on this. Russia in the north, they think, don't know. East could be China. We don't know. We can theorize, but you get in dangerous territory there. And I have, I was listening to a teacher years ago, and this kind of just came to my mind. And it talks about, at the Battle of Armageddon, the blood being up to a horse's bridle. Well, that would tell me that technology wouldn't work. Well, we have all kinds of ways to defeat technology, EMP weapons, so on and so forth, so you'd be out there in hand-to-hand combat. I don't know, but it's going to be a scary time on planet Earth when all this transpires. We can get over into Ezekiel 38 and 39, talking about Gog and Magog. And there's a lot of stipulation as to when this takes place. And I need to study it out to see if I can pin it down some. Some of it says it's before tribulation.
Some says it's after the 1,000-year reign. I don't know. But if you read Ezekiel 38 and 39, that is some serious business. I think it'd take them 7 months to bury the dead, I believe is what it says. 7 months. Going to be some serious stuff happening. So anyway, he hears these tidings, the Antichrist. So he sets out with great fury to destroy. Verse 45, and he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas of the glorious holy mountain. Well, those seas, to the best that I can see, is the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. Yet shall come to his end, and none shall help him. That's a humongous span of time right there that those few verses cover. And we probably won't get into that a whole lot today, because I'd like to get into the beginning of Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12. This, to the best I can understand, is the 70th and final week. This is it. This is the accumulation right here. There's not enough words to say what's going to happen here. This is a time of Jacob's trouble that is talked about in Deuteronomy 4 and 30, Jeremiah 30 and 7, Joel 2 and 2, Matthew 24 and 21. I mean, and I don't want to be around. Now, whether I will be or not, I don't know. But it's going to be some bad times. Verse 1. It says, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble. Time. Such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time, at that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Okay. There are several things that come out here. It's called the furnace of affliction in Ezekiel 22. I didn't write down all the names because I wasn't paying enough attention. But there is a phrase that I came across in Ezekiel 20. It talks about passing under the rod. And that's a Hebrew phrase that I thought was so interesting. And the reason I thought it was so interesting, we don't know a lot about shepherding in our current society. But back then, they carried a staff, and we've all seen it. You know, some of them had a crook, some of them didn't. And it was an offensive and defensive weapon. They could take that crook, and if a lamb was down over the edge of a bank and couldn't get up, they'd take that crook and hook it, and they'd pick it up. And there's all kinds of things they could do with it. But I had never saw this until last night when I was going through this. Passing under the rod, when the shepherds, I mean, you had the shepherds and you had several flocks and they'd all intermingle, so they would put marks behind their ears or notch their ears in a certain way so they could tell whose sheep was whose. And as they were passing by, the shepherd, he would take his rod and he'd move their ear and look at them and make sure that was his, and he'd herd it over here. And if they were going to pin them up, they would do the same thing to make sure everybody had the same sheep, the right sheep, had the right mark. And they would also use that staff to pull the wool back as they were going by so they could see what was underneath. And God uses this passing under the rod as an idiom on Israel. Israel's going to have to pass under the rod. So will we. Are we sealed with the Holy Spirit? No, are we going to pass the inspection? I just thought that was fascinating. Then I come across, if I can find it here,
I'm bad about coming across stuff and not marking everything. Zechariah. You know, during the Holocaust, it's believed that a third of the Jewish people were murdered, died. A third of them. Okay? So over here in Zechariah, chapter 13, and we're going to start about verse 8. It says, "And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and I will refine them as silver is refined, and try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God." Well, that's telling me that through this tribulation, a third of the Jewish people is all that's going to survive. Zechariah chapter 13, verses 8 and 9. And we'll go back and hit 8 again. It says, "And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein." I don't know, but that's telling me that 2/3 of them is going to die. Of God's chosen people. The Jewish people are God's chosen people. The church belongs to Christ. Okay? He paid for it with his blood. So, the Jewish people have suffered for years and years and years and years and years and years because they would not heed what God was telling them. And, you know, if he will try his chosen people this way, what makes us any better? You know? We are saved by grace. We don't deserve it. We can't earn it. I mean, you know, when I look at my place in the grand scheme of things, it is nothing. But God thought enough of me to send his son to die for me, to give me the opportunity to become a son of God. That's where we lose sight of things, I think. We get so caught up in everyday life, what we think is important. Mostly my next meal. I mean, it's not important. It don't. Our next step or our next breath after we die is what's important. What mark will we make that will carry through eternity? It don't matter if my vehicle's running, walk. You know, there's some things that are just so much more important that I don't have the words for it. Verse 2. It says, "And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." And to my knowledge, this is the first time in the Bible that everlasting life, those 2 words, is used. So let's go to Matthew 25. Y'all probably know where I'm headed, but it ties in with this so well. Matthew 25, verse 31. It says, "When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats, passing under the rod. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king shall say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was a hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee a hungered, and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger, and took thee in, or naked, and clothed thee? And when saw we thee sick, or in prison, and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Hell was not made for us, it was made for him and his angels. For I was a hungered, and you gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you took me not in. Naked, and you clothed me not. Sick, and in prison, and you visited me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee a hungered, or a thirst, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of the least of these, you did it not to me. And all these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. You know, we try our best here at this church to fulfill a lot of these. But how much is enough? You know, how much is enough? Is it ever enough? Do I take all that I have and throw at this cause? The natural man in me says, But the spiritual man says, well, it ain't yours to do with anyway. It all belongs to God. He's just letting you use it, see what you can do with it. Tough stuff. You know, as I was studying this, and I didn't know it was going to go this way, and I'm glad it did go this way, but for us that are children of the King, planet Earth is as close to hell as we'll ever get. Think about that. But for those that don't know the King, this is as close to heaven as they'll ever get. You know? And that's a sobering thought. When you read the book and it's saying that most of them ain't going to make it. So, that's some heavy stuff right there. I don't know which direction we'll go in next time. We'll see which way the Lord leads. I wasn't going to go this way, but it just kind of pushed me that way. Our responsibility for what God has given us is great. Great. We just have to remember what we've been given and what He expects of us. I fail all the time. That's the bad part, you know. But I have an advocate. You know, thank the Lord. Well, I'm going to leave y'all with that and give you something else to think about this week.